Welcome to this webinar. Today we'll cover an introduction to AdviserGo, navigation of the system, a few what-if scenarios, and how to compare plans and run reports. It should take around 50 minutes to an hour, and what we're going to cover are three key scenarios for Jane and John Webb's. I'm not going to cover any data entry. There's a separate video on that if you want to watch. So in terms of getting everything into the plan, which I'll go through in a second, the three scenarios we're going to look at are: can they afford private school? They'd like to sell the rental property at some point. And what if one of us loses our jobs for a period of time due to ill health? So we're going to look at those three scenarios, but before I do that, I'm going to talk through in sequence the dashboard, timeline, and let's see tabs, and give you an idea as well of how to interpret the chart. Before I start on that, what does Voyant do? Bring up this page. So Voyant offers an extensive financial planning tool, and it can bring together multiple aspects of the client's life to create a visual of their present and future projected financial plan. It can help provide clarity and open up insightful conversations with your clients around these three big questions. What happens if one of us dies earlier than expected? Will we be all right if there's a market crash? Can we afford to retire earlier? It shows visuals of the client's goals, key events in their life, and what assets and income they have in the plan to achieve these goals, and can use these to project a cash flow chart along with other charts such as assets and expenses over time. You can create what-if scenarios, which I'll show you on the call, and there's a range of insights you can run on the plans. I won't really cover the insights today, but if you're interested, we can always do a separate session on them in the future. So really it can help instigate conversations around prioritization of goals and key planning areas, such as the need for more retirement savings, or in fact, if more money can be spent. So how do you get in? You go to australia.planwithvoyant.com, and you can also go there to sign up for a free trial if you haven't already. And then once you're in, make sure if you go to the silhouette top right in preferences that your inline help is set to yes. I'll show you this as we go, and this is a really useful feature to have set up, as it's got the help windows when you go through entry and in the insights. Okay, so let's get started in the dashboard view. When you first start a plan, a good place to go to first is actually the down in dashboard view in plan settings. So in here, check and edit where necessary these assumptions. These are just placeholders, the ones that you have to start with, and you will want to go in here and make sure these are appropriate for your firm. So have a look at these. A lot of these are the default settings, and many of these things can be changed on an individual item level. So for example, inflation here is 2.5%, but I can go to the individual expense and change that inflation rate on a particular expense. If you'd like to know more about what each of these do in the system, this is where inline help comes in. Anything with a dotted green line underneath it, if you hover over, you see a little question mark on the mouse, click on it, and it'll let you know where this assumption is used in the system. And there's more information and a help tab if you'd like to get our email. Click on the client's name top right, and you can also request support. So starting in dashboard, this is where you enter all the information into the plan. You go to the plus button bottom right, and that's where you enter everything about the client. Once you've entered it, it appears in this list here. I'm just going to use this downward arrow below the chart to expand everything. And you can edit these things by clicking on them from this page. You can have a look at each of the entries once you put them in, to check they're set up how you'd like. And also I'll show you as we go how to check your plan in year view. So let's take, for example, the emergency fund. In here, I've set up $33,000 emergency fund account, that's growing by a net growth rate of 1 minus 0.5 fees. I'll show you that in year view later. And if I go to withdrawal limit, I've actually said do not allow. So Voyant's not allowed to access this account through the entirety of the plan, even if there's shortfall. So that's a ring-fenced account, not allowed for use in the plan. The other option in type is you can do minimum balance, and you can say like you can use the money from the account, but please leave in $30,000, for example. I'm just going to switch that back to do not allow. And the other thing to show you, which is relevant to what we're doing in a second, is there's a rental property in here. Here's the rental property. You'll also see that there's some rental income and debt on the rental property. There's also some expenses associated with the rental property. Now you see there's a little link icon next to these things. That means they're linked to something. And if I click on the rental property and go to link debts, here's the linked debt on the rental property, the mortgage. Linked expenses, it's got its own expense. And linked income, it's got its own rental income. Now, why link them? Linking them means if we sell the rental property at some point in the plan, which we're going to do, then these things will automatically stop because the rental property no longer exists. So the debt will get paid off and the income and expenses will stop. So it's useful to link things especially if you're going to be doing some planning later in terms of buying or selling properties. Finally, if you put in the superannuation pensions, make sure that you've got one each for the different phases, the accumulation and retirement phase, and a transfer between the two of them. I'm not going to cover that in too much detail today, but if you click on any of the fields when you're in the super and go to inline help, you can watch a video which explains how to do that if you need more information. Note, if you click employer link plan yes and link it to their earnings in the plan, so you already have to have entered in some income for that person to link it to it, then it will automatically start paying the guaranteed employer contributions for the super. It will also reveal new fields for salary sacrifice and additional employer contributions as well. So it's worth being aware that that's employer link plan yes, and it will do it as a percentage of the earnings in that year. So if the earnings are increasing each year by the growth rate on the earnings, then the monetary amount of that percentage will also increase. I'll show you in year view when we come on to that how to check the contributions into the super. Let's now go to timeline. So this is the framework for your plan. In Voyant, all the timings of things, so that's the start and finish of income, the start and stop of contributions, property ownership, etc., are all linked to events. This is so if you move the event, everything linked to it also moves. So eventually, once you've built your plan, you can literally just click and drag this umbrella to an earlier point in the plan to model early retirement. Hide and show different events that belong to different people. So if I want to take out, say, the child in the plan, I can just click top right on the name here to remove their events. Or I could just look at the children's events on the timeline and not the parents. Let's add a new event. So how do I do this? You can either double click above this bar here, above this stage saying retirement. You can either double click in this space or go to the plus button bottom right and event. I'm going to call this event later retirement. Starts. I'm okay with this icon and I'm going to put this at age 80. So from this point in the plan, I'd like to step down their holidays. So they're going on holidays and trips, but from age 80, I'd like to step this down so they're reduced in terms of how much they're going to spend on those. We'll come on to these as special events soon as well. Okay, so done. We'll save my event. Let's look for it on the timeline. Here it is, later retirement starts. As a new feature, just to be aware, you can then go to the plus button bottom right and stage. Now, stages are really there to help you create a visual along the timeline in terms of different key stages in the life of the plan. So here we just have in the purple pre-retirement and in the blue retirement, but you could change that to suit your firm or the types of planning, for example, protection years, retirement years. In this plan, we're going to add later retirement. So you need an event in order to have the start and end of the stage. So in this case, the later retirement starts as the start of the stage. So I'll select that. And then the end of the plan, if I click on that event down here, set as end event is the end of the stage. You can choose the color of the stage and a name. And then done. So now along the bottom of my timeline, I have 3 different colors: pre-retirement, retirement, and later retirement. Okay, let's now go to the holidays and trips that we entered and step them down at this later retirement starts event. So I go back to dashboard. I go to the post-retirement holidays and trips. This is the amount I've entered in for this plan. It's $50,000 a year. It's not a basic expense, it's a luxury expense, and it's going to inflate by 2.5% every year. In timing, it's from the whole of the retirement part of the plan. So it starts at retirement, finishes at mortality. And what I'd like to do now is step down at this event from 50 to 30. Now keep the timing screen as it is. The timing screen has to be the entire time that this expense is in the plan, including step up and downs. So we'll keep the timing as it is, and we'll go to steps, add step, and we're going to step this down to 30. And we're going to go to timing and tell it when to step it down, and that's this event here. So I can either drag it or click on it and set as step timing. Okay, so let's go done here and then done on the goal. Now, goals in the plan are trackable expenses. So these were categorized as goals, or you could categorize them as expenses. Really what the goals do is pull out the expense a bit more obviously in the plan. They show you progress towards it. They appear differently in the reports. So if there's something you want to highlight with the client in terms of a specific goal, then you can put it in as a goal. Now here, we've now got the black line dropping at the later retirement starts event, but the blue line stays the same. And I'll talk you through the blue and the black lines in a minute, but basically the blue line is the basic expenses and the black line is the luxury, and that goal was a luxury goal. We'll cover that again in a second. So let's go back to timeline. Here are our goals down here. This is where they are in the plan. And we've added a new event by going to the plus button. We've added a new stage. And we've used that event to step down expenses. Okay, let's go to Let's See. Single chart and look at the cash flow plan, what it shows us. So every bar represents a year in the plan. The bar year will run in Voyant from the start date of when you started the plan for a year. Blue means there's sufficient income and assets to meet their needs throughout the plan, and red indicates a shortfall due to insufficient liquid assets and income to meet their total expenditure at that point. See the client's ages at the bottom of the chart. In this case, we've got the principal client at the top, So that's the person you entered in first, and then in this case it's a spouse below them. The blue line, this light blue line, which I was talking about a second ago, so that is basic expenses, taxes and debts. So if you've entered a goal or an expense in as basic, then that will appear in this light blue line. So let's just go to dashboard. I'll show you a basic expense I've entered. Here's my basic expenses, and this slider here is set to basic. So that's what means that from here to here, it's going to appear in that light blue line. Okay, so let's go back. So light blue line, basic expenses, taxes and debts. Black line also includes these things, as well as leisure and luxury expenses and contributions into things. So let's look at this again. The basic line hasn't changed when we did the step down at age 80, but the black line did change because the luxury goal was stepped down. What you can do now is triple check that. So what's good practice is to go to year view, top right of the chart, scroll along to the year that you're looking at, and this shows you the details for each year of the plan. It's a really useful place to go check that you've set up what you think you set up. So cash flows, the money in that year, and the money being used. Expenses, the money out. And investments and pensions will give you the balance in that year of the plan, end of year balances and growth rates. In this case, let's look at this expense. So the post-retirement holidays and trips is inflated now to 130k, and if I go to the right, see the change, minus 38.5%, and it's dropped. So that's good. It's doing the step down as we wanted. Let's go to the pre-retirement years, and if I go to the pensions tab, that will show the supers in the plan. To show more information about these, click on the name of them in year view, and you can see planned, so that'll be the salary sacrifice. Actual, that's the salary sacrifice contribution after the 15% tax. And unscheduled, which is the employer guaranteed contributions. Later on, when you start transferring from the accumulation to the retirement phase, you'll also see the transfer balance cap amount here, and you can see the different bucket values in here as well. So actually clicking on the name of the pension is quite useful, so just be aware you can do that in year view to see a few more details. And in net growth, you can see the growth rate assumed after fees. All right, I'm just going to click on year view and come out of there. What we can do now is turn the details on the chart. So when I click on details, you can see in the plan which income and assets are used to meet the expenses. A nice way to look at this is to hide all. Up the top here, I'm just clicking on this hide all word, and I get the red chart. So this is the expense profile for the chart. And what I've done in here actually is already entered the school fees for the daughter. They start when she's 12 and they finish after she finishes university at 22. You can see that black line is going up there as well. Now, you can bring in items one at a time to build up the story of the cash flow. So in your pre-retirement years, there's employment. John retires at age 68, so then it's Jane's income after that until she retires. Just from employment, there isn't quite enough to meet the school fees as well as their normal expenditure in these years. You see the red at the moment. But if we put in the other income, which is the rental property income, that is then fine. This is the purple coming in from the rental property. It means they do have enough, assuming that everything is increasing with the growth rates that we've set in the assumptions. There's then the supers, and for the years that they have it, there's the age pension, And to make up the rest, they're using the taxable savings with a bit of shortfall at the end of the plan. Now, the cash flow chart gives money in, money out. In other words, affordability of the lifestyle throughout the whole of the plan with the assumptions projected. But what's underpinning this? This is when it's useful to look at the liquid assets chart. So which assets are being used in the plan, and you can see the accumulation and decumulation of them. So let's go to Let's See and Geo chart. And what we're going to do now is, for the same plan, we've got the cash flow chart at the top and the assets chart for this plan underneath. So you can see the building up of the green, which is the supers as they put money into them. There's not too much difference in terms of the taxable savings, and then the decumulation in retirement, and they run out before the end of the plan. And you see I still have some taxable money left here, even though there's red, and that'll be that emergency fund that we ring-fenced in the dashboard view. All right, if you want to have a look at the 3 dots, and you can look at real money, for example, which strips out RPI and translates the chart more into today's terms. And also, when you're in these views, you can put on the legend so you can still see which color means which thing in the plan. All right, so let's go to Let's See single chart again for this plan. Once your timeline reflects the client's events and goals, and you've entered all the assets and income and expenditure to achieve these goals in the dashboard, you've reviewed the Let's See charts. Now it's time to look at some scenarios, and look, if eventually as well, you can look at some of the insights. So what were their objectives? One was, can they afford private school? So private school I've already entered in here. If I double click on this bar, it's a quick way of getting to year view. And then expenses, you can see school fees for Felicity in this year, and they keep going until, as I say, age 22. So at the moment, as I say, given the assumptions in the plan, the school fees are affordable. But their next question was, we'd like to sell our rental property at some point. When should we do this? They don't want the rental income in their retirement. Well, sorry, they want the rental income now, but they don't want the rental property management in their retirement years. So let's model selling the rental property at retirement. So let's go to what if. This creates a copy of this plan and means that we can change things in this what if plan without affecting our base plan. So let's say sell rental property. You can copy any other of the plans that you've already created. Now, once I do things in the sell rental property plan, it's not going to impact any other plan. So you could, for example, set your base plan up as this is the situation as now, and you can create a what if scenario with, okay, this is what we'd recommend, and they can compare them. In this case, to sell the rental property, I go to the property and I click on it and I go to timing. Now, at the moment, the rental property is owned throughout the duration of the plan. It says buy now, but if you go to basics, you see that is this a future purchase? No. So that means they own it at the moment. I'm going to double click on the bar here. It's a fast way of creating an event without having to go to the timeline screen. I'm going to double click just above the purple in this space, and I'm going to say rental property sell. I'm going to give it a little house icon and set as end event. So now the rental property is owned from the start of the plan and sold at the rental property sale event. Before I click done, have a think to yourselves what you'd expect to see in the cash flow chart. So in terms of money in, money out, what is the difference this is going to make? So we'd expect to see the spike, which we do, which is the money coming in from the asset liquidation in that year. By default, because it's a one-off in the plan, it's a big asset liquidation, Voyant will save the surplus. And so they've got more liquid assets in cash to use throughout the rest of the plan, which means there's now no longer any red. If there's surplus regular income, such as employment or supers, by default, that's assumed spent. Where to check if it's spent or if it's saved, we'll go to the year view. For that year, using this slider, and go to the investments tab. If surplus is being saved, you'll see it in here. It will go to their cash sweep accounts as a contribution. So this is a jointly owned rental property, so it's going half and half into each of their cash sweep accounts. Now, in this case, it's unlikely that they want to put it into cash. They would like to put the surplus into investments. So you'd like to model that. So let's go to dashboard. And the plus button, transfers. In the year of the property sale, this money is in surplus. So we select all surplus as a transfer from. Then transfer to general investment account. You could create an account specifically for this purpose, but in this case, we'll choose one already in the plan. All available surplus. No, not recurring and not before expenses. It's just the surplus we want. And then we go to timing. And the key here is to select the same timing as the rental property sale event. So now if we move this event on the timeline, both the rental property selling and also this investment of the surplus into investments will move as well. So let's click done. Now the black line should now go right the way around the top of that yellow bar, as you can see, because the black line includes contributions into things. If we double click on the bars to go to year view, we now see in the investments tab that money is a contribution directly into that general investment account. It's now no longer going to the cash sweep accounts, so it's growing at 4% compounded each year as opposed to 0.5. So now let's go to let's see. And I've got two plans now. So we'll go to compare plans, chart view. So this is what I'd like to compare with. So we want to compare, I've actually created a different demo base plan. Here we go. So I'm going to compare my sell rental property with the base plan and see what the differences are with both the cash flow and let's look at the assets chart. So in the cash flow, the top chart is where the rental property is sold. You can see the spike. And the bottom chart is where it's kept. Now in the top chart, this purple from the rental property income stops on the sale of the rental property. You see that income is no longer in the plan. But also the expenses are now slightly less because there's no rental property expenses in the plan either. There is now more liquid assets in the plans. There's no longer any red in the final 2 years. And as you can see, you see the spike. Let's look at the assets chart now. And this one's best looked at without the details on. So in the top chart, at this event here, you see the purple is the non-liquid, put the legend on while we're in the view. The purple is the non-liquid, so that's the property. And you can see, as you'd expect, the value of the non-liquid drops when the rental property is sold. And blue increases because it's going into taxable. If I want to, I can actually remove the property from the chart by just clicking on it, and this leaves just the liquid assets. if you'd like to compare that without the property. Okay, we're going to model an additional scenario now. So the red in the plan is a long time away, and we're keeping an eye on the longevity of assets, but we'd like to model something a bit closer, which is loss of income if one of them, for example, got sick and couldn't work. So let's create a new what if scenario for this. So I click on what if. I'll do it on the sell rental property plan. So sell rental property and loss of income. How do we do a loss of income? So before we do this, let's have a look in what they have in the plan in terms of income protection and critical illness cover. The income protection is in the plan for Jane, as well as critical illness, and John's just got critical illness and not income protection. So let's go to the plus button bottom right and click on event. In here, you'll see special events. Now, these actually do something in the plan. So the ones up here in type, these are just placeholders. They're waiting for you to assign them in the timing screen. These special events actually do something. So critical illness will pay out any critical illness cover. The disability event will pay out any income protection for the owner and also stop any income for that owner. The disability end will put it back to as it was before, so it will start their income back. Major loss, this is if you'd like to model a market crash in the plan, you can create, say, if you wanted, a number of major loss events by selecting this and putting it on the timeline. So let's go to disability, and we're going to put the first disability event in a couple of years. This little downward arrow here, save and add another, because I would also like to put the disability end event in. So this is for Jane. Save and add another. So we'll click disability end, and we'll put that around there, but we can change it once we look at it on the timeline. Again for Jane. So let's have a look and see what impact this has had on the plan. Let's look at the details. Now I'm going to drag, so if I click on this tag here and click on the event, I can change the timing of it, or you can go to the timeline screen and click and drag it. What we can see once it loads is that you have the green in the plan, this green here from the insurance, from her income protection. There's still the employment income from her partner, and there's still the rental income, and to meet their total expenses, they do need a little bit from their taxable savings as well. As we did before, go to year view, and you could see to check in cash flow. In the first 2 years, we've still got Jane's earnings. And then by this year, it's only John's salary. There's no more Jane's earnings, but there is the income protection until the disability end event. Okay, so that was for Jane. There's not any red there, and the income protection is covering some of their income. Let's do this for John. Now, I could create a new what if scenario for this purpose, but in this case, I'm just going to show you by clicking on the event, clicking on it here, and changing the owner. So let's just have a look at it for John now. So I'm going to change the owner of this one and the owner of the other disability end event as well. As I say, you could do a what if scenario if you wanted to. So this is for John. What if there was a loss of income in the plan for about 5 years or so? What we're looking at now is there's still Jane's income in those years. There's still the rental income, but there's much more of a reliance on the taxable savings. And in fact, after about 3 years, there's then a shortfall because they've run out of taxable savings to meet their needs. So if I double click on this bar and I go to the investments tab, you can see the general investment account is now run out. That was the last withdrawal from it of the 10,000. And there's still the emergency fund, but that's ring fenced in the plan. Withdrawal limit 0. So you can see in this case there is a bit of shortfall until John's able to go back to work, assuming back to work at the same salary as before. What you can do once you've done your what if scenarios, say I go to my sell rental property plan, is you can then use some of the insights for that scenario. So if I go to insights, you can use some of the stress testing ones, for example, loss capacity. How much could they lose a certain event in the plan and still be okay and run their assets to 0 by the end of the plan? You've got retirement spending, so that's the level of spending that could be achieved in retirement. Retirement spending replaces their normal expenditure in the plan. It doesn't replace the debt, but it replaces the normal expenditure in the plan and gives you an idea of wiggle room in the plan to what's there. Now, note it does get rid of all the other expenditure. So if there's one-off or there's steps, it won't take that into account. It's just one value given for the retirement spending capacity inflated over time. Now, with all the insights, the nice thing about them is you can go to year view within the insight to see what's happening here. What is this plan assuming? Now, it's given $86,000 in retirement, and if I go to the assets chart, you can see that liquid assets are run to 0 by the end of the plan, and that's quite a common thing with the insights in terms of how they work. If I go to year view, you can see in the expenses are as normal for the pre-retirement years, and then when we get to retirement, they change to the spending analysis expense for the rest of the retirement. So that's what I mean by replacing the other expenses. It gives you a great idea of how much retirement spend, say, you have in this plan compared to another plan. With all these insights, they are conversation starters. So it's not the answer as such, but they're a great way to start the conversation around, okay, well, in this scenario, how does this feel? This is kind of the amount, annual savings, for example, this is the amount you need to save between now and retirement or in order to get rid of that shortfall. There's also some videos in the lump sum savings, for example, you can watch a little video on it. Okay, so we've looked at the dashboard, we saw what was in the plan already. We've looked at the timeline and we added an event in, and we added in a stage, and then we went back to dashboard and stepped down one of the goals at that event. We've gone to Let's See, and we've looked at the single chart, dual chart, and chart view. Note as well that there are lots of other different types of chart that we've not looked at yet in terms of expenses, debts, net worth, plan worth, and taxes. So you can look at them at your leisure and depending on the plan. We've touched on insights and we've looked at some what if scenarios. So the last thing we're going to look at then is the report section. In here, you can choose which of these things you'd like to add to the report for which plan. So in this case, I'm going to start with my demo base plan, and I'd like the financial summary, assumptions, the timeline, and the fact find. I'm going to add to report. And then I'm going to select the sell rental property plan. And for this one, I'd like the financial summary, and that's it. And then I'm going to select the sell rental property and loss of income plan. I'll do the financial summary for that one as well. So you can see you can build up your report from different scenarios and different elements depending on what you want to put in the report. Once you have them over on the right hand side, you can then rearrange them. So let's put the assumptions at the bottom. I'm just clicking and dragging it. Let's put the financial summaries all at the top, and then the timeline and fact find underneath. If you see a cog and customize, you can click on this and customize some of the elements within that financial summary report. So I'd like to change the cash flow chart to the detailed one for this one. I'm going to keep in the goals, but you can take out some of the insights if you want, if they're not relevant to the conversations you're having. So for example, you could deselect life needs and lump sum savings, for example, and just have these three. Note you can save a report set over on the right hand side. So say you always had financial summary, assumptions, events, fact find, you always wanted those added in. You can, once you've added in them to the right, you can save the selected report set and they'll keep them over on the right for you. It's also possible to look at the numbers behind these things. If you select cash flow or assets and export raw data and images, that will give you a big spreadsheet with all the numbers for each year of the plan. Okay, so this will take a little while to generate because for each of the financial summary reports, it's running 6 or so of the insights in the report. When you see the financial summary report and the insights at the bottom, such as you don't have to save any more money in order to not have any shortfall in the plan, that kind of thing, those are exactly the same things as in the Insights tab. So if you're wondering where the values of these are coming from, just go to the Insights tab and run that insight, click on Year View, and you'll find out more information about it. Now, the other thing that would be worth doing is just clicking on all of them one time, generating the report and seeing what each of them show you in the report. If you'd like to, like I say, go to the inline help, that's a good place to get our email address. You've also got access to have a question, support@planwithvoyant.com. And here's our knowledge base. You can search in here. I've got a few guides in here and I'll keep adding them, such as the recontribution strategy we've got at the moment for the super, or just how to add a super. For example, there's some guides on that if you don't want to watch the video. All right, that's our report generated. Because I changed the chart, you see now it's got the colored, this one below, I didn't change it to the detailed one, so it's just the blue or the red. Whereas in this one, I used the customize to change the chart, and I used it to remove some of these insights at the bottom here. So this is why it's only showing 3, whereas for this one here, it's showing all 6. So you can customize it, and you can change, like I say, you can change the charts, or you can put the assets chart in, and so on. Down the bottom, it shows you which plan it's for. So that's for demo base plan. And this one down the bottom here is sell rent property. So as I say, have a look at the reports. If you are doing events and goals, this is when the stages come in, because you can just bring it to life a bit more with the stages, as opposed to having an event which you have to look up and say, oh, what's that event? You can just see it in a glance with the stage. And this is the goals that are brought out to life as well as the fact find. I hope you found that useful. Any questions, see our email address or go to the client name top right and request support. Thanks for listening.